everyone, and welcome. My name is Kirsten Marcy. I'm the Education and Community Engagement Programs at Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. We're here tonight at Robert DuGrenier's studio in Townsend, Vermont for an artist demonstration and studio visit. This event is presented in connection with the Vermont Glass Guild's exhibit Inspired by the Past, which is on view at VMAC through March 5th. And Robert DuGrenier has a piece in that show titled Brattle Beach 2121. And it looks at what an archaeological dig might look like 100 years from now of Brattleboro. And there are live hermit crabs in the exhibit with hand-blown, glass-blown shells that were made right here in the studio by Robert DuGrenier. So tonight's program is going to be around an hour. We're going to start with about 20 minutes of glass-blowing demonstration with Robert and Catherine Despont, and then we'll move on to a gallery walkthrough to look at some of Robert's other work and end with a sit-down question and answer session with all of you. If you'd like to ask a question, you can do so through the Zoom application in the Q&A function or with the chat. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can use the chat function on Facebook to ask questions as well, and we'll keep an eye on that too. You're welcome to ask questions at any time, but we'll get to them at the end of the program. This event is presented free of charge to our community. If you'd like to make a donation to support free programming like this, you can do so at brattleboromuseum.org/support, and we'd really appreciate your donation. I think that's all the housekeeping to take care of. With that, I'd like to introduce Robert and Catherine and hand it over to you for the demonstration.
Great. Hi. Greetings, everyone. I'm Robert DuGrenier. This is my assistant, Catherine. We're going to be doing a couple short demonstrations. The first one we're going to be working on is making a hand-blown glass hermit crab shell. I sort of came upon this whole concept back in 1995. I was down on the beach in Abaco, and I went for a swim, came back, and found something strange moving on my blanket. And I looked, and it was a hermit crab, but it looked kind of unusual. And I picked it up, and it was actually living in the broken neck of a Coke bottle. It's like, wow, I can make a better home than this broken neck of a Coke bottle. And then I started thinking about, here we go to the beach, we collect all these beautiful shells, and that has a definite effect on the secondary homes that hermit crabs live in. So I came back to my Vermont studio and just sort of had it in the back of my head, and I wanted to try to make a shell. So for 6 months, I made shells, I got hermit crabs, and none of them would move in. It's like, what am I doing wrong? This is just crazy. And so I'm going to go over to the Marber now and show you some of the shells. So after 6 months, I decided to cut open a real shell and to really see what the interior cavity was, to see what the texture was, to really understand really what was in there. And it was originally made by a mollusk. He created his whole calcified shell, and the mollusk dies, and the hermit crab has a soft abdomen, and the abdomen needs to be protected. And so they scavenge for these shells. And when there's no shells around, they scavenge for junk. And they're living in plastic bottle caps, they're living in broken necks of bottles, they're living in dolls' heads. You Google that and you'll see an amazing creativity of what they're protecting their soft shell at. So when I cut the shell in half, what I realized was I was blowing the glass with the wrong spiral. So 97% of the hermit crabs in the world have a right-hand spiral, only 3% have a left-hand spiral. So I was blowing these left-handed spirals, and that's why the crabs wouldn't move in. So I started and blew a right-handed spiral, and sure enough, the crabs moved in immediately. And I've made them in colors and textures, and I've done some studies with them to see that there really isn't a preference. 50% will take a colored shell, 50% will take a clear shell. What's interesting with the clear shells is when they're in the shell and you put your hand over the tank, the crab will like wince like a bird's coming along for predation, but it's already in its shell. So so it's protected. Where in a regular calcified shell, he can't see that, and there's more chances for him to get eaten by a bird or whatever is around doing that. You can see here's one of the live shells in live crabs in one of my shells. And so when I got inspired by the collection at the museum, what was interesting was it was sort of this, everything that was there was probably dug up at some point. The vessel that I was inspired by was an Iranian vessel, like 2000 BC. And I started thinking about climate change and about loss of habitat, not only for hermit crabs, but for human beings. And with the raise in the seawater that's happening around the world, my inspiration was to do an archaeological dig and have the crabs excavating these vessels that were inspired by these Iranian food vessels that went extinct and got buried and lost food. So we're going to go on the bench now, and they're fairly quick to make. It took me like 43 years and about 2 minutes to make one. Just all the time that it takes to perfect glass blowing is quite intense. So Catherine's going to get a gather for us. I'm going to sit at the bench, and the glass furnace here is 2,300 degrees. And it's a large pot of molten glass, and she's going to go and do a nice gather. And I have the special blow hose that we've been using, which really helps with seeing the bubble as the crab, as it grows. We're working with wooden blocks to shape the bubble. And once the bubble's shaped, I'm going to be blowing into it. A small bubble is going to come out. And now I'm going to be grabbing and lengthening it. And this is going to help us create the body that's going to be spiraled. So this is going to go back into what we call the glory hole, which is a reheating oven. And that allows us to constantly reheat. Glass, has a liquid stage in the studio, not very long, just a few minutes. I mean, like 20 seconds or so. So once we get it hot, we're going to take tweezers and we're going to pinch it and then start spiraling it up. And I'm blowing as I'm spiraling. And we're going to make a jack line. One important thing is the crabs are really good critics. And if they don't like the weight, the shape of the spiral, they're not going to move in. Catherine is now getting us a punty. We're going to attach it on the end. We're going to open up where it was attached to the pipe, and we're going to be able to shape that so the opening is precise. Okay, come down a little. Yep, perfect. I'm going to knock it off the pipe, and then we're going to reheat that. And with the reheating process, I'll be able to heat where it broke off from the pipe, and then we'll be able to form that shape to the exact shape of a traditional snail shell that hermit crabs live in. I'm just melting that opening. And when it starts to move on me, we're going to take it over here. I'm going to continue to torch it. So I'm spot heating. And this is going to allow me to open the neck of the piece. mimicking the shape of the shell. I'm reheating, and that will allow some of the tool marks that went on the opening to smooth out. So it really looks like a natural shell. There's a graphite smoothing tool. And so I'm getting the shape. I've studied a lot of different shell varieties, getting the shape and the opening. So I know that the hermit crab will move into it. So I'm going to torch it off here. And once the shell's made, it goes into what's called an annealing oven. And the annealing oven is set at 960 degrees. That's the temperature the glass is still molten, but super slow moving, so it doesn't deform. And it will sit in there for 18 hours until the morning. And hopefully the shell will come out, and as you can see, I'm just melting off that tip. And it finishes the shell actually very naturally with a little squiggle. And the shell now goes into the annealing oven. And you can see some of the production of the stuff that we made today. So pretty quick. It's something that I've perfected over the years. I have touch tanks in about 15 aquariums across the world, in Okinawa, in England, Atlanta, the Cape. And really, I got involved with it as an educational tool. It was really something to show the world that, you know, you shouldn't go to the beach and collect all the most beautiful shells. You really should leave them, and hopefully educate people about climate change and the loss of habitat. And the world population of crabs has really diminished quite a bit. I've been working with a couple scientists who have been working on hermit crab communication. One of them, Mark Landrap at Dartmouth College. He believes that the hermit crab communication is more sophisticated than primates. And he needed a way to record what they were saying. And with a calcified shell, you can't digitally record what's going on inside. And so he found my glass shells, and I did a whole series of them. And he's now recorded about 30 different sounds that the hermit crabs communicate. Like, there's a plethora of food, other hermit crabs come and eat, let's eat together. Or they're changing shells, and there's a certain sound that they make. And the hermit crabs will kind of get in a conga line in descending order, and one will change, the next will change, the next will change, and it's absolutely fascinating. I've been working with another scientist at Oxford University, and he's been working with cichlids, which are a fish that live in Lake Tanganyika. And he's been studying sort of the social habitat. And he always wondered, when a male went off to steal another shell and bring it to his colony of shells, whether he was actually stealing females or shells with eggs in them, and he never knew. And so we blew a colony of glass shells, and he populated them with fish. And now he's able to document who's coming in and who's going out. It's pretty fascinating. So the next demo we're doing is, I've been working on a new series of these glass planets. And we're going to make one of these planets now. And the planets have gold leaf in them. The end product of the planets is going to be a installation that's permanent at the Southern Vermont Art Center in their museum. And the planets, after they're made, we've actually photographed them, and we're digitally manipulating them. And we're creating a whole series of NFTs. And an NFT is a non-fungible token. I don't know if you know much about that. It's kind of brand new to me. What will be wonderful is that these non-fungible tokens, we're going to do 2,000 images, which will open with the exhibit of the chandelier. And the people that buy the particular non-fungible token planet will have the ability somehow to interact with the chandelier, either in our universe or the meta universe. And so we're still figuring out some of the technical glitches. And that show should open sometime later this year. So you can see some of the planets that are here that I've been working on. Depending on the lighting, they change tremendously. And so we're going to be doing a whole series of these wonderful planets in this new metaverse. So we've lined up some color on the table for this particular one. We're also going to be using some real gold leaf for the planet. So the various NFTs will have different values depending on the rarity, either of the color that I used or potentially gold or gold made glass, which is rubies, and purples are made from gold. So we're going to start one of these guys. So again, in order to start this, we're working on a punty rod that's quite hot. And I'm going to start to gather a couple gathers of glass on here. We're going to come over, we're going to roll up the color and continue forming the planets. So I'm going to go in for a first gather. And we're going to let this cool just a little bit, and then I'm going to gather over it. Glass is quite hot today, so you can only gather so much at a time, so you can put multiple layers. And what's interesting with the planets we're making, you'll see multiple layers of color, and we're doing various things in between each one of the layers. Another gather. And now we're going to start to roll, use the heat of this to roll into the colored glass, which is, it's the same base glass, but it's made with different oxides, tin oxide, chrome oxide, iron oxide, depending on the colors we're using. And we're able to pick that up on the surface. And this is starting the shape of the interior of the planet. We're reheating that, and Catherine's going to set up some gold on the marver. Potentially, it might fly away because we have the door open, but we can shut that. So I want to get this nice and hot. When you have color glass and clear glass, sometimes the coefficient of expansion is different. And so you really want to melt the glass in really, really well. You okay?
Yeah.
That's good. So I'm going to come over and roll this into the gold. Oh, your camera, you're blocking the camera too. So we're going to just, whoa, hello, here we go. And so this is what's called a 22 karat moon gold. I just love the name of it since they are planets and moons that we're creating. And you can see the gold melts directly onto the surface. The glass is really hot. And we're going to reheat that, and then I'm going to poke and prod it with my tweezers and give some really nice patterns to it. And then we're going to encase a few bubbles in there. And once the coloration is done on the inside, we cover it with clear glass, and that helps magnify all of the colors that are on the inside of the planet. And this is kind of like marbleizing paper. We've got the gold on the surface. Sometimes the tweezers stick, so we need to reheat them. And I'm twisting and turning and poking and prodding. And it's going to give us an amazing surface on the inside. If I poke some holes into it, when we gather on top of it, we're going to trap air. and cause these really beautiful bubbles. And as I like to say to some of my students, the paperweights that, will last over 10,000 years. And what's interesting is when there's no oxygen left in the planet, some mad scientist is going to cut these open and have its last breath of fresh air. So they're not paperweights, they're prepper weights. Thanks to Catherine's terminology. Okay, so it's stiffening up now, which is what I'm looking for. If I gathered too quickly, some of the color glass might drip into our clear tank and contaminate the clear tank. The other thing I'm going to do is I have this little magic white powder, and we're going to dust a little bit of powder on the surface, and that's going to also cause some really beautiful minute bubbles. It's baking soda, just like it makes a cake rise, it's going to make the glass rise. If I can still sort of move it around with my tweezers, I know it's too hot to gather, but it looks pretty good. So we're going to go in and get another clear gather on top of this. And to activate those little bubbles that I put in with the baking soda, we're going into the glory hole, and that's going to finish the gas being released from the baking soda and causes some really nice textural scenes. And so this wooden block, which has been soaked in water, releases steam, and it allows the glass to glide on the wood, basically on a bed of steam. And when the steam disappears, you can see little sparks fly. We re-wet the block. And basically, I'm trying to shape it into this round sphere shape. And once I get it shaped pretty well, I'm going to make a constriction line right at the end of the pipe. And that constriction line is going to help us knock the planet off so it can anneal properly. And you can see the colors we started with was a combination of tans, greens, and whites. All the colors now are bright orange. At 1800 degrees, all the color that we work with glows orange. It's not till it gets around 1200 degrees that those colors start to come back out and we know what the true color is. So we're going to let this cool down a little, and I'm going to torch the end because we're going to make that constriction line a little smaller on the next go around. Start to see some of the darker spots. That means that the color's cooling, and we're going to be able to remove it. So we're going to heat it one more time. We have the kaolin set up for knocking off. So I'm doing a flash polish. This is doing two things. Using the wooden tool, it creates a texture on the surface of the glass, and I want to eliminate that texture. So having it cool down and then heat it up in a hot glory hole, it remelts the top layer, and that top layer then becomes a real mirror finish and an amazing lens that will help magnify all of the color that's on the inside. I'm going to make that constriction line a little smaller now. And once it's that size, I'm going to now shape the paperweight, or planet, to have a flat bottom. And when I like the roundness of it, we stop doing that. And then I'm going to just cool that area. so it doesn't flop around on us too much. You can open that door again. It's really hot in here. So we're letting the glass now cool down. If I put this away in the annealing oven too soon, what would happen is that the planet would just go flat like a pancake. And so we need to cool it to a stage that that's above 960 degrees, but below 1200 degrees. And that will keep its shape. So when we open up tomorrow, it will be as we expected. And you can start to see some of the colors now coming out. It went from bright orange. You can see some of the gold leaf that's in there. And then some of the beiges and tans are coming out. And the next step is we're going to have to take it off. And the way I take this off is I have a butter knife, and that little constriction line, we're just going to cool it with a butter knife. And that sets a little tension up there, and I can just bonk it off with a piece of wood. And then I have a maple leaf stamp. We'll torch the bottom, and that's sort of my studio logo. We'll go on and finish the object really nicely. So now that we can see the colors coming out, you know, it's interesting too if we put a light behind it. It really explodes. So my trusty little butter knife, just making that little constriction line. And then my trusty little bonker just bonks it right off. We're going to torch it and then stamp it with my maple leaf stamp. I want to get it nice and hot. It's going to be glowing orange. And I'll be able to stamp the stamp in and make a seal. It also gives it a flat place to sit, and also an area that I'm going to attach it on the chandelier with. And I'm pushing pretty hard, making a nice little indent there. Yep, and away it goes. Pretty cool. So that's going to wrap it up from the demo portion. And we're going to have a walk through the gallery and kind of look at some of the other work that's around. And then we're going to have a little sit down talk and take it from there. So we're going to go in. You want to take them in and I'll follow you?
Sure, that sounds great. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Catherine. That was wonderful. All right, you can follow me and we'll head on in to the, this is going to be the gallery portion of the tour.
Yep. And let's turn this up.
All right, so this is Robert DuGrenier's gallery. You can see some of the shells here that he's made for hermit crabs. And some of these, there's some glasses behind the shells with that, the shells embedded in the stems as well. These are bigger than the shells that we have on view at the museum. But you can see shells like this with real live hermit crabs inside them at the museum. And we're open Wednesday to Sunday, 10 to 4. And the show will be up until March 5th, if you'd like to check it out.
No, we're going to head charge now. We emptied the glass tank today and wanted to maybe take a quick view of
Sure.
how we recharge the glass in the furnace. I forgot,
Yeah,
sorry.
that sounds great. Yeah, let's go.
So I preheated the glass in the anneal to 960 degrees. I don't want to shock the ceramic pot. So I'm going to lift this 960 degree glass out, We're going to bring it over to the oven, and then we're going to pour it in all the way up, all the way. Oh, it's only about 50 pounds here. Nope. Whew. How the glass gets charged. So that will heat up and start to melt down. You can put the fiber on the back. And in a half an hour, we'll put another bucket in. And we do that consecutively every half hour until it's full.
Wow. And how hot is it in there?
It's right now 2070 degrees.
Wow.
It's going to get up to 2150, and that's our melting temperature. And it will stay that way for 4 hours, and then it will squeeze down to 1900, squeezes the bubbles out, and then we'll bring it up to our working temperatures is 2050.
Okay.
So that's pretty awesome.
Wow. Yeah. Great. Thank you. That was fun to see.
Yeah. I'd be here all night if I didn't do it.
All right. So we took a look at some of the shells over here. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what we're seeing in this gallery?
Yeah, so this is my gallery attached to the studio in Townsend. And we bought the studio in 1997. I was living in New York City for the last 20 years. And they 10 times my rent on my studio in Soho. And so I said to my wife, we had bought a farm up in West Townsend in 93. So we'd been up here on weekends and then decided to make the full move in 1997. And it's a beautiful old house. It also houses the Historical Society, which I'm the vice president of. I love history. And my wife worked in marketing glass for a high-end French glass company. And she's like, oh, I always wanted my own gallery. So anyways, we opened the gallery in the main part of the house. So I have some various collections that I've done over time. Most of the production I've done on the hermit crab shells have been with clear glass. And this new collection, I really started to look at some of the patterns that are in natural shells. And I was totally blown away, the colorations and the textures. How can nature make something so beautiful? And so I wanted them functional, but functionals that a hermit crab can live in them, but also something that is quite beautiful and inspired by nature. And I love I have these old driftwood pieces that my dad had collected his whole life. He was a bird carver and made these miniature birds. And he passed away in 2015. And when we were cleaning out his house, I found boxes and boxes of these beautiful, and they kind of remind me of the shape of snails coming out of them. So they're part of the display. And he lives on, which is awesome because he was a great inspiration to me.
There's these stands too.
Yeah, the stands are, I wanted to elevate them some way, but I wanted something that was sort of related to the ocean. And so they're sort of inspired by sea urchins. Oh, and cool. And so you can sort of mix and match. And they're pretty elaborate. You saw that one shell we did that took like 2.5 minutes to make. These are about an hour each, with layering all the color, and really, it was a really fun diversion. And this was part of COVID. We couldn't go anywhere or do anything. We normally go down to the islands, and so this was my island vacation during COVID. Yeah, which I like. A lot of colors. I know, and then I was inspired. I've never really done much stemware, but I was inspired to do these shell tumblers. I love those. They're so playful. Which are fun, yeah. And they're actually really fun to drink out of. Yeah. So this is another installation that I did. I had a show actually at Brattleboro Museum many years ago, which it was glass of all senses. And this one, each one of the flowers had a different fragrance from my past. So as I smelled what emitted from the flower, reminded me of my grandmother and my mother and old girlfriends. And these are some from that collection. In this gallery over here, this is a new series that I'm just working on also, which I'm blowing these glass blown forms that are sort of like geodes. And I am introducing into them materials that crystallize. And so these are crystals that I'm growing. And so I'm starting to grow crystals in the geodes, and then the fluid will come out and the crystals will be left inside the glass. So a lot of the work that I do has sort of the element of time involved. So I'll do something and then nature will take over and do something. And then when it comes to a point where it's aesthetically pleasing to me, I'll stop that process. So this is a new series that I haven't shown yet, but I'm just working on these geodes. And this happens to be the maple syrup that we make. We tapped out our trees the other day, and I overboiled some maple syrup one day, and the sugar crystals condensed and grew crystals. And so the first collection is going to be maple sugar crystals.
Cool.
This main gallery is featuring work that came from Out of the Ashes collection. My barn up at my farm burnt down in 2015. And it was pretty devastating. We had lost our barn cat in September. And in October, of course, the rodents moved in and ate some of the wires and set the barn on fire. I never really associated cats with fire protection, but I have a whole new appreciation for cats now. And so when they came in with this huge excavator, it was a barn that was built in 1810 up on the Taft farm that we have. And there was my favorite shovel, minus its handle, going into the dumpster. It's like, stop, that's my favorite shovel. And I just couldn't part with it. So I kind of went through the rubble and put a huge pile of, all these objects. And it's like, I'm going to do something with these. I don't know what. So we had lanterns. These were old kerosene lanterns that were actually for our wedding that we had up there in 1995. And that was the first thing I worked on. I sort of started pouring glass and almost, imagining that, there was a glass jar above the lantern that melted and actually encased it. What was really amazing was that none of these cracked. And normally when you combine glass and metal together, the coefficient of expansion is different. And what happens is one will shrink more and the glass will shatter. So the first morning when I opened up the kiln and nothing had cracked, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I started really playing. And this was a series, these were golf clubs that were my grandfather's golf clubs. He was in the PGA Tour, senior tour. And these were in this beautiful red leather bag, real leather bag. And so I did a collection of these objects in sort of a water, water, inspired by water, which is wild. Yeah, so, my pitchforks and old rims to tires. The tires had burnt and I made glass tires. So it was playful. It really was important, I think, for me to get over the trauma of the barn fire. It was sort of my therapy, and it was fun. And some of the titles are, this one's Ready to Roll, so they're kind of humorous, and just kind of going through the trauma that something like a fire in your life can do. And I'm a pack rat, so I collect everything. It's interesting, the carriage here, I had just brought down to the studio that September because we do some production of pumpkins, as every glassblower does. And I needed a display. And I said, oh, let's bring the carriage down. So I took it apart, reassembled it. So this would probably, some parts of this would probably be on the wall with glass on it. But this is reignited with some of the objects that were in the fire.
Do you think that the fact that the objects had been in the fire had something to do with them the glass not breaking or the metal not?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a secret,
That's a secret
that I learned. No, which is really fascinating, because what happened was I didn't clean the tools. So it was all covered with carbon. So from all the wood, everything was coated with a carbon. And so that carbon created a release agent. So the glass never actually melted to the metal. So it wasn't one. So they both shrank separately. And this one did crack. You can see there's a little crack. And I re-glued it. It's called Broken Heart. And this was my favorite shovel.
Yeah.
That's wild. These are a collection of These have been growing now. I have an orchard up at the farm. I don't know if you see the glass bark.
Yeah.
So early on in the tree's life, I would make these hand-blown glass, little sculptures that would go on the tree, and then it would grow over time. And you can see this bubble. There were two bubbles here. This bubble actually broke, which is kind of part of the piece. And have done a lot of work with glass and nature. I've done a lot of work with beehives and put in glass objects into beehives. And then the bees will totally encase it in wax and honeycomb in the most amazing fashion you can imagine.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting, that collaboration with nature and glass and thinking about time, because I think of glass blowing as being so fast, and it's something that you have to be very responsive and in the moment, and it happens in the matter of hours,
Right. And then it's freeze, and then it freezes,
and then it's static. Right?
Exactly. So
and
that happened only at one small moment in time,
right.
and then it's static. And that was sort of the element of time in all of these pieces, that I'd like to capture that moment of time when glass freezes, basically.
Yeah, and but then working with nature kind of allows you to move beyond that,
Right.
and has this longer and more organic lifespan.
Exactly.
You kind of release control.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But keep an eye on it, and
Yeah.
when something interesting happens, a lot of times it smashes, but when something
Yeah.
interesting happens, bring it back in and look at it at the studio and see if you like it. And
It's a collaboration.
if you do, hang it on the wall.
Yeah. And this is nice. It's a way to memorialize and keep with you these objects.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give
It's
them a
funny.
new life.
Give
Yeah.
totally a new life.
Mhm.
It's like crazy. Yeah, more of the Out of the Ashes series. And again, some of these were shown at the museum, I think in 2018 or 19. I had a one-man show and featured some of the objects from the collection. So yeah, I love this piece is called Gut Wrenched. You always look for the right size wrench and you can never find it. And after everything burnt down, I went through it and I got all my tools back.
Yeah, there they all are. Yeah.
And yeah, I love the collection of axes. So I recreated glass handles for the axes and polished the edge, kind of gave it a new life, which was really intriguing and kind of meant to happen. And some of them are on stands and
Yeah, the other thing that I like about the series is that combination of glass, which you think of as being fragile,
right,
and delicate, and metal, which is you think of as the opposite, like strong and sturdy, and but both can be sharp,
Exactly.
And so they have this potential,
and both can be strong.
Both can be strong, and both can be weak. Like the tools have been ruined by the fire. So,
Exactly.
yeah, it kind of flips both on their head.
And it's nice too. It's like taking the history of all these marks and dents that were in this, somebody slamming this with a hammer and folding over the metal, and really corroding that, just for I don't know how old that is. It's probably 150 years old. But then it memorializes it. So it memorializes all of the workmanship, all of the logs that cut down. So it sort of gives it a place and stops that history from continuing. And what's great is, it's got a beautiful, sharp, polished edge now, which will always be sharp and polished because no one's dumb enough to actually use it.
Yeah.
We hope.
Yeah. And it is a memorial to all those human hands. Like you can
Exactly.
see the record of those.
Yeah, and it's really important too, how they felt in my hand. They really had to be weighted nice. So I really wanted a tool that still could work. And when I was displaying the hammers at the museum, of course, I couldn't find my hammer to hammer in the little picture hanger. So I used the hammer I hammered it in. Yeah. So they've actually been used.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just kind of.
So
crazy.
it does feel good, like the weight of the hammer.
Oh,
feels,
they're wonderful. Feel it.
Wow. That's amazing.
Don't you want to use it?
Yeah. That's so cool.
And I did.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So, and I assembled these hot and then you can see, we did a really nice polish, which has a beautiful reflection, just like the glass does, but has been used a zillion times. And and lost. I never knew I had this big a collection of hammers
Yeah.
until everything, it was a 4-story barn, so everything just went on the store. Yeah, you can see the picture of the flame here, and this is the bottom of the barn with everything melted with the excavator coming and picking up the stuff. So it was like, stop.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
It's wild. So this was a series, and I loved it because it was a series that came and went. You know,
Mhm.
I ran out of tools, all the sculptures were made, and then okay, it's done.
Yeah.
And that was a nice,
As a natural.
it was a natural ending. It was like
Yeah.
nice. It worked out so many, so many issues, and then spent 3 years fighting the insurance company because they didn't want to pay for the rebuild. So it's like crazy.
Put that chapter.
That chapter away. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Right.
Totally.
So these are more shells here.
Yeah, these are more shells. This is a tank, which I normally do, called a crabitat. So live crabs will be living in that tank. And it's very sculptural. So instead of having a classical square tank, I created these sort of fantasy tanks that you can have in your home, which they're fun. And
So do these go out to individual residences? Do they go to
Yeah.
aquariums, or are these for home?
I've done both. We did a reality TV show called Fish Tank Kings. It's part of Nat Geo,
Oh, cool.
National Geographic, and they were doing a kids school down in Boynton Beach, Florida, and they saw some of my live hermit crabs online and was like, oh my God, this is incredible. They wanted to really engage the kids in science, and so the company Fish Tank Kings that the reality show was about offered to do a tank for their school, and they wanted to do it in the hall. So that all the different classrooms can interact with it rather than being in one classroom. And so we went down there, and I think like 40% of the kids, even though they're 2 miles away from the beach, had never been to the beach. So we took them down, they collected things that was going to be in the tank. And so I created a lot of glass objects in the tank along with the glass shells. And it was magical. And I created some tanks that actually were sort of saddled over the edge, so they could take the individual tank into their classroom and really study the hermit crabs. And there were both marine crabs in the aquarium and land crabs in the tanks that saddled over the edge.
Wow. That's
yes.
amazing.
And hopefully it will create some marine biologists in the future,
Yeah.
really to get them spurred into something that they can be passionate about.
Yeah, when they're young. And I think we have a video of one of the hermit crabs in
Yeah.
one of your shells, so we can share screen and play that
Yeah,
video.
that would be
for
awesome. Yeah, that's
folks. Is it playing now?
cool.
Great.
Yeah, that's a hermit crab. I was out on the island of Appledore this summer. It's the marine biology undergraduate department for Cornell, Dartmouth, and UNH. And I was the artist in residence there, and I worked with the marine biology students and kind of blew their mind in many cases, because I was looking at it as art and they're like dissecting it as science.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible collaboration, both for me and for them. And we brought torches out so we could actually make some of the glass pieces with torches. I was potted with the shark class, and we did some really beautiful torch flame worked, what are they called? Witch's purse. So it's the shark egg purse that you can find on the beach with the live shark in them.
Wow.
And so we recreated some of those in glass.
Oh my
And
gosh.
trying to recreate them, really, the students really understood something that because they had to really look, because they're trying to duplicate it.
Right.
And they'd never done that before. They were studying the biology and the chemistry and everything else, but really the form and beauty of how can this survive in nature? They have these wonderful little tendrils,
Mhm.
and those tendrils will hang in seaweed. So it looks like seaweed. So no one's going to eat the great protein that's inside. So it's really analyzing the environment and how nature has evolved in a way that the ones that tangled in the seaweed the most, the ones that survived.
Yeah.
Which is
That's
really fascinating.
That's so interesting. And I love that combination of art and science. I find that there are programs at like the MFA where they have medical students
Yeah.
come and do close looking at art. And I think that's such a valuable experience for people in the sciences, really anybody, to take the time, slow down and really look.
Yeah.
So that's something that art can do really well.
Yeah, and I'm passionate about science and that interaction with working with scientists has just opened a lot more doors. Recently, I did a project with another professor up at Dartmouth. He was studying a nocturnal bat that didn't eat bugs, but ate nectar of the certain flower that would bloom at night. And he couldn't understand, because it was a long tubular flower, how the bat could get in there and actually drink the nectar, and that no one had ever filmed it. And he set up a camera that shot, 1 million frames per second, and the bat comes flying in, and its tongue is twice as long as its body. So it was able to unfold its tongue. So I blew these glass flowers, and the nectar was put into the flowers, and they were able to unfurl their tongue and drink the nectar.
Wow.
Captured. I mean, it was just,
That's
again,
amazing. Yeah.
fascinating collaboration with
nature.
Yeah, with nature,
Yeah.
and with people studying it in a different way than I do. So
That's great.
it's really cool.
I think we want to move towards the
Sure.
Q&A
Yeah.
and maybe look at your planets a little bit more.
Yeah, these are some of the finished planets that are going to be in the chandelier. That's going to be a permanent collection over at the Southern Vermont Art Center. That whole concept of NFT, the non-fungible token, really fascinated me. One thing I really liked about it is in the blockchain of the NFT, there's code written in there. So, I can sell a piece of work and it could resell 5 times in my lifetime, and the artist gets paid the first time. With the NFTs, it's written in the blockchain that a percentage always goes back to the artist. So it's really the first time. I mean, musicians have been able to do that, but really visual and painters and sculptors never had that opportunity. And so that's one thing that really kind of fascinated me. And I love the interaction where a lot of the NFTs that are out there, I think they're pretty crappy digital art personally. Some of them are done even by not by artists. And when you see a blockhead selling for $67 million, it's like, what is the art world coming to? This is like crazy. And I'm a maker. I love to do actual things. And so these photographed are spectacular. And I think that you had a couple images of some of these planets that we have. And so I took the concept to the Southern Vermont Art Center and said they had wanted to commission me to do a chandelier as a permanent collection. And I took the idea of doing the NFTs and launching the actual object is now in a museum collection that was created, that created the NFT. And I thought that was really nice touch to go back into sort of reality and something based. So I've blown 210 of these planets, and it's sort of a starburst shaped chandelier, and each planet will have an LED light behind it, which will be controlled by the individual that purchases the NFT. So there's another play on reality. And whether it's the actual chandelier that's in the museum, we're still figuring out the technical part, or whether it's the chandelier that's going to be in the metaverse. Hopefully we're going to buy some space and it's going to be in orbit around Elon Musk's stuff.
Wow.
Who knows? I mean, it's wonderful, and it's sort of a whole new dimension.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating, and again, a collection that I wouldn't ever dream that I would be doing, but really into it, and really into to understanding that whole technology, but doing something that is incredibly beautiful, has meaning, has actuality, but also exists in a digital form. So it's really, that whole world of NFT, I think, is fantastic.
It's pretty incredible. And for anybody who's interested in learning more about NFTs, if you have questions, we have a great recorded talk about them on
Yeah, I
our
did
website.
see that. That actually helped me tremendously. And I did get in touch with the woman that,
with Ann Sculptor.
with Ann, and she answered a lot of questions that I didn't know anything about.
Yeah,
so
that's great. I'm really glad. Yeah, so please check that out. If you go to brattleboromuseum.org, it's under programs, and there's a video archive, so you can find it there. And I think the museum's going to have an exhibit out with NFTs.
Oh, cool. We have to get one of these in it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I did show some of the images while you were talking.
Oh, great.
People got a chance
Awesome.
to see those.
Yeah, cool.
So, we have a few minutes for questions. So if
Great.
anybody has any questions, you can use the Q&A function or the chat function in Zoom. And I'm keeping an eye on those. And if you're with us on Facebook, you can ask questions on Facebook as well, and we'll keep an eye there. But I was curious, as we get started with the Q&A, if you could tell us more about your teaching. You mentioned that you mentioned teaching at one point in the demo.
It's interesting. I got my MFA because I thought I was going to be teaching the rest of my life. And I was successful enough as an artist that I didn't need to teach. But I love to share my passion. And so I do glass blowing classes here at the studio at the end of every day that I work, Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. I usually have a class that people can sign up for. So I'm teaching through there. And then doing sort of these artist in residences. That's the second year I've been out to the program at UNH in Cornell on Appledore Island. And it's called the Shoals Marine Laboratory. And I'm planning on going back this year if they'll have me. And the inspiration that I get from people looking at the world in a different way than I look at it is fantastic. So it's that collaboration. And, it's not only me, explaining my expertise, but also the inspiration that I get from students and the excitement really is a new chapter in my life. So I really love it.
That's great. We have a question about the planets. Wondering about the color selection, for the chandelier as a whole. Are you thinking about how the colors work together? Are you thinking about the planets individually?
Yeah, so as NFTs, there are certain rarities. So there's an algorithm that we're going to use that certain colors I only used very little of. For instance, like the gold ruby is made from real gold and it's really expensive. So there's X amount of planets that have gold ruby in it. There are planets that have real gold in it. There are others that have other exotic colors. Aventurine glass, which is an amazing sort of sparkly glass that's really beautiful. They're all tonally probably the same. What I like about is the interaction of being able to, and we're still working on controlling, turning on and turning off one of the planets. So it's an interactive sculpture. So you might be in there and it's like, oh my God, somebody owns that NFT and they're playing with the sculpture. And so that whole interactiveness with it is really beautiful. But I think that as a collection of, I was inspired by the oceans. I was inspired by fire and orange and various colors. So sort of natural colors that came from minerals, and that's where the color is derived from. And sort of representing every planet has different minerals in it. And so just fantasizing about, oh, this has uranium in it, and this has titanium in it, and this planet's filled with gold. So kind of mocking in one sense a reality that's out there.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love the planets, and I love how different they look and different types of light. And I think it's going to be really cool with a chandelier. It'll probably look different every time.
It will, and that's what I love about that too, whether it's daylight and or illuminated.
Right. Yeah, we have another question about the hermit crabs, wondering if somebody's interested in helping hermit crabs, like how can they get started? What can they do?
One, try to conserve energy. So climate change isn't going to affect habitats that are around the globe, which are being diminished right now. It just daily. I mean, it's devastating what coral reefs are happening, what's happening around low-lying shores around the world. So like we can all do our part in conserving energy. Not picking up those beautiful shells on the beach and leaving them for the hermit crabs to survive, and just talking about and being aware and being educated about some creature that's so small yet has survived billions of years. It goes back way back, and somehow it's always readjusted and always reinvented itself. So I think just education and finding, that particular thing was something that fascinated me. And the more I got into it, the more I learned about it and the more respect I had for it. And, they're my greatest critic, because if I don't blow a shell, proper spiral, proper weight, it won't live in it. So, you know, the ones that are happy will live in them. The ones that don't want it, they'll find another shell that's better. So really being in tune with nature to mimic nature in a way that nature accepts it. And that's part of the joy that I get out of, you know, I'm a big fly fisherman and I love to tie my own flies, and that I can mock a fly with my chickens that I grow using their chicken feathers to look like a caddisfly, and the trout thinks it's a caddisfly, and I catch it and then release it. It's just kind of a wonderful joy.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm thinking back, we had an artist talk with Michael Abrams, and he was talking about that relationship with nature and observing nature, thinking about how that interacts with his art and ways that you can imitate it and ways that you can't, right? In that
Exactly.
Yeah. We have another question about your getting started with glass blowing. So if somebody wanted to try it and isn't sure what to do, how would you recommend they get started?
Yeah, take a class. There's a lot of glass studios around that have classes, and you can experience the material in a way that you saw how hot it was. Some people are just like way put off with the heat, but with proper instruction. We offer classes here. There are classes at Randy Solin's studio. We started the Vermont Glass Guild over 10 years ago now, and there's numerous Vermont artists that do classes. And so I think that's the best way. I originally got started, I was 13 years old, and our parents took us up to the Montreal Expo in November. And I remember there was a pavilion that I had to go in. I made my parents wait 3.5 hours in line, freezing cold November, and got in, and it was the Czechoslovakian pavilion and featured these massive, incredible glass sculptures. And I get goosebumps talking about it. When I saw them, it's like, this is what I want to do. So at an early age, 13, it's phenomenal. And the program that you guys do with the Glasstastics, those are all our future glass blowers. They're getting in love with the material and designing, and hopefully someday they'll have classes and explore it.
Yeah, that's great. It's such a fun exhibit, that show.
I love that show. I've been in it every year since it started.
That's great.
That's really good.
We just have a comment. Someone said, "This is amazing." Another person said, "This has been awesome and so informative. Thank you so much." So I think we'll wrap it up there. And a reminder that Robert's permanent installation will be at Southern Vermont Arts Center.
Sometime this year. We're not sure.
Not sure when
I'm going to launch my satellite of planets into the metaverse.
Yeah, really exciting. Thank you so much for the sneak peek, for showing us your studio and your work.
This is great.
And a reminder that you can come to the museum to see Robert's hermit crabs in the Inspired by the Past exhibit at BMAC. And we're open Wednesday to Sunday, 10 to 4, and admission is pay as you wish. We really encourage you to stop by. It's only up until March 5th, so you have a couple weeks left to come see it. And I think that's it. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. You can email the museum and we'll make sure that Robert gets your questions. So thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you.
This has been a pleasure.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for visiting.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
Yep.